Have you ever walked away from a training or a workshop, or maybe a book, or even a really powerful conversation, and you leave feeling inspired, but then 2 weeks later, nothing had changed? I think most of us have. And it's not because necessarily we weren't paying attention or we didn't really care that much about the content. There's actually a reason for it. And once you understand, it can change how you approach growth entirely. There's a researcher named Herman Ebbinghaus, and he studied memory and forgetting way back in the 1800s. But what he found still holds up today. And that is that without reinforcement, we tend to forget roughly 50% of what we've learned within 1 hour, and 70% within a day, and up to 90% within 1 week. And more recently, research shows that only 12% of training content is retained by employees after 30 days, and that 60% of employees say they forget training content within 1 week when they don't apply it immediately. And so we spend time, we spend money and energy on development, but then most of it disappears. And it's not because the training wasn't good, it's because knowledge alone doesn't create change. Practice is what creates real behavior change. And here's where it gets really interesting. When people try to practice a new behavior, like for example, a new communication style, maybe a new way of leading, a different approach to handling a conflict, of course, it often feels uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar, it's new, and it might even feel fake. We've all heard fake it till we make it. Doesn't feel comfortable at first. But then sometimes people stop right there and they tell themselves, well, it doesn't feel authentic. It's not really me. But there is a Harvard Business Review article by a researcher named Erminia Ibarra. I love this article. It's called The Authenticity Paradox. And it speaks directly to this. And her research on leadership transitions found that when we're in unfamiliar territory, we naturally retreat back to what feels comfortable, even when that familiar behavior is holding us back. I'm sure we can all think of behavior in our either personal or professional life that we know is holding us back. We want to change it, but it's what's comfortable. And so it just continues to hold us back. But in leadership, in Ibarra's research, she's talking about we use this as authenticity, as our definition of authenticity, as a reason to stay stuck. Well, this new behavior doesn't feel like me. I'm not being an authentic leader. But then it inhibits your opportunity to grow beyond that, maybe to that next version of you. And the reframe that she offers is pretty powerful. She says, feeling unfamiliar is not the same thing as being inauthentic. Think about how much you've likely grown in your personal or professional life over the years. Well, that growth created change. And at the starting point, the behavior that led to the change is uncomfortable. And a new behavior feels foreign for just that reason, because it's new. It's not necessarily because it's wrong for you. You just haven't accumulated enough repetition, enough reps yet of doing the behavior. So how for it to feel like you, for it to feel authentic. So how long does it take to actually create change? Well, there's a landmark study, 2009, and it found that habits took anywhere from 18 to 254 days to actually develop. And then the average was 66 days. And consistent repetition was the single biggest factor, which doesn't mean, of course, that you have to be perfect the first time, that the first rep you get in, or and there's no such thing as perfection anyhow, but hopefully that can take a little bit of trepidation away, to just knowing that you're going to get better with practice. But repetition was the single biggest factor in developing a new habit. It wasn't motivation and it wasn't intensity. It was just repetition, which makes a lot of sense, but still we sometimes stop ourselves from getting started and trying a new behavior, trying a new approach, in stopping a behavior that's holding us back and adopting a new one because it's uncomfortable. And habits, especially habits that are a little bit more complicated, like involving communication or a new behavior, these habits take longer to form than the simple habits. And so this is why interventions lasting, for example, 2 months to 5 months were more effective in the research than short-term approaches. So an ongoing opportunity to continue practicing what you learned after post-training versus just the one training session, of course, is going to be help you be more successful in adopting a new behavior. And yeah, that's exactly why one training session, one workshop, one inspiring conversation rarely produces lasting change and growth on its own. So it can plant the seed, but the reps, that's where the growth happens. And I'll share a personal example. So I'm a runner. I started running when I was pretty young. And then so young kid, like pre-teenager, I started running. But then many years later, as a young adult, I got curious about yoga. So yoga was something that I wanted to try. And I thought about trying it for about 9 months before I actually took my first yoga class. And now yoga is just something that I do every single week, multiple times per week. It's become part of, who I am and what I enjoy. And it's a habit. It feels very natural. But I didn't become someone who appreciates yoga by reading about it or by taking just that one class. I became someone who appreciates yoga and adopted it as part of my lifestyle by doing it over and over and over. And now it's not even a thought. Someone will ask me, maybe if I haven't seen them in a while, are you still doing yoga? And I think, well, of course, it's not even something that I have to contemplate or to consider, am I going to continue doing this? And the same is true with forming habits in a new communication style. If you recognize, I know I have at times, I'm always working to improve communication. All of us, that's an area that all of us can improve, continue to improve. But it's challenging at first. It's adopting a new behavior. And same is true with your leadership presence. If there's there's a leader and you would like to emulate something about their leadership style. Well, that first takes observation and the will to try, but then it takes reps before it's going to become your authentic self, before it's going to feel more natural. And this is how coaching works. This is the core of how coaching works, at least how I approach it. When a client, for example, they have maybe a difficult conversation coming up, what we do is we don't just talk about what they should say, we workshop it. And we do talk about it. Of course, we first explore what it is they actually want to communicate and why they haven't been saying what they want to say. Maybe rather than being direct, they've been softening a bit, or sometimes we can just choose to avoid the difficult conversation altogether. But whatever it is, we look at what it is they truly want to say. And of course, we work to dig deeper to uncover what's holding them back and why. But then the real change happens because, well, first I give them a framework, but then the real change happens when we practice it together. And that's what we do. We workshop it back and forth. And this way they get in lots of reps before the real moment ever arrives. And it's not to say that they're going to be perfect or even feel comfortable in that conversation in the real moment. But they've gotten reps in before by workshopping it, practice, applying the frameworks of learning in real time repeatedly. And so they adopt the new behavior and then continue on with it. And it's not just a coaching technique. This is how the brain works. Research shows that employees apply only about 15% of what they learn in training to their actual job. And then research shows that training without real world application, this is what creates the gap between learning and doing. And bridging that gap between knowing and doing is repetition in the context of the situation that you're working to apply the behavior. So it's not just about learning. Behavioral change is about context and repetition within that context. And this is why after action reviews are so important. When something doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go, a hard conversation, a moment that you were leading a team member, maybe a decision, split second that you made under pressure, and then later you realize, you know what, I don't really like the end result there, or I don't like how I showed up. I could have shown up better. Well, what you want to do is you want to go back and ask yourself, okay, what was the context? What was the situation? And what is it that you were feeling? And then what did that feeling lead you to do? So what was the action? And then what happened? And then this is the key here. What would you do differently next time? That's a rep right there. So even if you're not practicing during the times that you're not practicing in training or with a coach, when you're doing your after action reviews on your own, that's getting in a rep right there. That's how you build the new patterns. And yes, first it does start with awareness, but getting in the practice, getting in the repetitions, that's how you create real change, that the change that you're aspiring to work toward by doing it. That's where the clarity comes. Clarity comes through action. A lot of times we hold back and we wait to try something new until we have full certainty, until we have clarity. But that's not how it works. It works in the opposite way. You take the step, you try the rep, you practice, and then you're clearer the next time. So I challenge you to ask yourself, where in your work or maybe in your leadership are you waiting to feel ready before you take a new action, before you try and embody by doing a new behavior? Because what if readiness doesn't come before the reps? Well, then you never change, and you never take that step. And readiness is going to come from the reps, not before the reps. And this is the work that I do with clients, building the reps, not just the awareness. Awareness is the first step, but the reps, that's where the real work, the real change happens. If this is something that, if this resonates and it's something that you're working on, you're welcome to send me a message. I'm happy to continue the conversation. And also one more thing, if you're an organization and you do leadership trainings and you've noticed that the learning doesn't always translate into the real behavior change afterward, this is a gap that I actually help bridge as well. I work with teams after the initial training to give leaders time to workshop, to practice, to apply what they've learned in real time. So if that's something that is worth exploring, I'd love to connect as well. And I'm just going to see if I have any questions here. Okay. If you're watching the replay and you have a question or a comment, definitely feel free to drop a line and I'll follow up there. And if you got some value from the video today, hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.